Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get this started. Hey Jason, I recently started the 20 rep squat program. I would like to do rest pause training with my other compound movements, but I don't want to burn myself out doing 2 work sets with rest pause too much when doing my big 3 lifts 3 times a week. Thanks. Alright brother, the answer to this is very simple. Then don't do 2 sets. And here's what I mean. I covered the other day when discussing things like drop sets and rest pause. The purpose of doing extended sets like this is so that you can hit the same upper threshold fibers and build up some of the same anabolic metabolites from your training as if you had done multiple sets with only doing technically 1 extended single set. Now, that being said, if you're doing all of these big exercises 3 times a week, which is, a good idea. That's how I do it. That's how I recommend most people do it. Don't do multiple sets of rest pause, because think about it this way. Let's say you're doing your squat, bench press, and deadlift. You're doing a 20 rep squat program 3 times a week, right? You're coming in and then you're doing deadlift, bench press, rows, and overhead press with rest pause. All right, that is 5 total rest pause sets with big, heavy barbell movements done pretty much every 48 hours. If you start doing multiple sets of that, you're going to significantly impede your recovery ability. I don't think that you need to do more than that. Anything beyond doing something as basic as just 5 exercises like that, particularly big, heavy barbell movements with rest pause training, 1 set of rest pause is all you should need, particularly at that frequency of training. Now, beyond that, anything you do need to just be some basic accessory work for your weak points. If you need a little more bicep training, then do some curls or some chin-ups or something. If you need more triceps, and do some tricep push-downs or skull crushers. It's not that difficult. Come in and do a little bit of accessory work afterwards. And you know what? If you need to do up to 2 or 3 sets for each of your isolation accessory movements instead of rest pausing, then do that. It's not a big deal. But when you're coming in doing big, heavy exercises 3 times a week with rest pause, I don't recommend that you do more than 1 set of that exercise at all. Do that 1 rest pause set 3 times a week. Again, on those big exercises, you're not going to grow any faster by doing extra work on that. All you're going to do is beat yourself up. I don't see the point in doing it. I wouldn't recommend that you do that. So yeah, limit it to 1 set. It'll be just fine, and that's really all you're going to be able to handle anyways. Trust me on this one. All right, next question. Hi Jason, I've been running a strength program, a tactical barbell, for 12 weeks. I'm ready to retest my maxes in progress. My question is, should I do a deload week in between? Everything, knees, tendons, elbows feel pretty good. I'm sleeping well too. All right, brother, here's what I would recommend. If you're running any program that has you run a full 12-week cycle, because he did ask a second question further down of how often should you deload, I think everyone should deload every 12 weeks, no matter what. I think 12 weeks is a good time to deload no matter what else you've done. And since a lot of programs using block style training are 12 weeks, I think 12-week deloads are absolutely appropriate. I think they're a good idea, and you should be able to squeeze in 4 of them a year, doing it every 12 weeks. So yeah, take a full deload week and then come back and test your maxes. Because again, if this is a pretty serious progressive program that's 12 weeks long, it is a good strength program, you have probably overreached a little bit near the end no matter what. And again, after 12 weeks of extended progression, I think you've earned a deload. A deload is warranted. Even if your joints and stuff aren't hurting or anything, go ahead and do it. What you need to understand, when joints and connective tissue start hurting, that's usually a sign that you might have waited a little too long to actually do the deload. That's then to just prevent injuries, not for ideal adaptation. Because if your tendons and stuff are starting to hurt, that means you probably overused those tendons already for too long, and you probably missed the peak for your deload. And that's why I always tell people a deload needs to be done immediately upon connective tissue pain. Immediately. You don't wait, because you've already probably waited too long for your deload. Now you're just going to start accumulating injuries at that point. So yeah, the 12 weeks is fine, even if things aren't hurting. Don't use the hurting as a guide to win. You use hurting as a guide to you waited too long already. So look at it from that perspective. All right, next question. How much does having more muscle mass, especially in the legs, increase calorie expenditure during cardio and in general during daily activity? Thanks. It's kind of a question of how long is a piece of string. To answer it significantly, if you're wanting someone to pin it down to a specific number, which we don't always know when people ask a question like this, I don't think we can do that. But it is fair to say that we know that moving more weight or moving more muscle mass requires more energy. That is undoubtedly true. So therefore, using a bigger muscle to do cardio is going to use more calories. How much more? We don't know. 1%, 5%, 10%, who knows? It's too hard to pin down, but we know that biologically it will have to use more calories. It might not be a lot more, but a little more is always good, because again, if you're doing cardios to burn through calories, well, that just makes it easier. And if you're doing cardio because you like to eat more and it's not even about weight loss, hey, that's also great, because you get to eat even more without gaining weight or without gaining body fat. That's a win-win all the way around. Now, the other thing to look at with it is that obviously having more muscle mass also increases your resting metabolic rate. And it does do so a little bit. That's been noted, but that's usually not a huge amount. It really comes down to that extra energy expenditure while up and moving around, meaning it might be possible for a person to, from when they started sedentary to when they reached nearly their maximum drug-free muscle size, while doing the same basic amount of activity, meaning the same type of weight training time every week, the same amount of cardio, they could, in theory, due to all the extra calories required to move themselves around and do all the cardio and activity, they could burn as much as an extra 1,000 calories a day, even though they feel like they're doing the same amount of work they were doing 3 years ago when they started training. So you're getting pretty significant at a certain point. And I don't think 1,000 calorie increase for someone who spent 3 years lifting and who is just generally physically active is actually unreasonable. In fact, I've known guys who have physically demanding jobs who are drug-free powerlifters, who are personal friends who I'm fairly sure were drug-free because they literally didn't know anything about drugs. Like, they were so clueless that they pretty much had to be natural, in my opinion, from just private conversations I had with them over a beer or chilling, whatever, who were needing stuff like 4,500 calories just to maintain their body weight. So, we're getting up to pretty extreme points, but they also had physically demanding jobs, and I've knew one who's like that. So yeah, it's fair to say gaining muscle mass is going to increase the calories you burn during all physical activity. How much? I don't know. You're going to have to assess your own TDEE yourself. It's not going to be something we could just easily throw a number out on. All right, next question. I've been doing deadlifting with huge amounts of volume. I'm coming off an injury caused by overworking, wondering if I lower the volume will I lose strength or mass. All right, brother, the reason you have an overworking and overuse injury is because you can't get out of that mindset that if you back down the amount of workload you're doing, that you're not going to continue to gain muscle and strength. And a lot of guys fall into that trap of they think that they use a high volume approach to make progress. And so therefore, if they don't sustain the high volume and high workload they did, that they're going to regress. And you know what? Nothing could be further from the truth. Plenty of people have gone back and forth between low volume and high volume training over the years. And guess what? They continued to make progress. They didn't just keep their progress and lose progress. They continued to make progress. Did you progressively overload? Then you're fine. Meaning, if you have been doing huge amounts of deadlift volume, you've hurt yourself doing it, and then you have to back down and say do a fifth of the volume you've been doing, but you add a little bit of weight to the bar, you'll probably continue to get stronger. You shouldn't lose gains at all. And people need to get out of this mindset of doing that, because that's, again, how people get overuse injuries. They think that they can come in and do high workload training year round. And I'm sorry, the people who come in and do really high volume training year round are either doing tons of little fluff and pump exercises, or they are really weak, or it's a combination of the two. Anyone who's seriously strong can't come in and do high volumes of big, heavy compound movements year round without eventually ripping stuff and tearing stuff. They get overuse injuries because you have to regulate those things. You've got to back down. You've got to periodize that stuff. Again, unless you're either really genetically gifted and just not prone to injuries, or you've used a ton of drugs to strengthen connective tissue or whatever, just not a good idea to do it. So you've got to get out of that mindset. No, there's no reason that you're going to lose progress by reducing your volume. In fact, there's no reason you can't continue to make more progress on lower volume. And ultimately, brother, you got to learn to keep that stuff in check. You've had one overuse injury. If you can't change your mentality, I guess after you have the second overuse injury, or the third one, or the fourth one, maybe you'll reassess it at that point. All right, next question. Hey Jason, you said that high reps after heavy set is detrimental to strength and size. Is it possible to work in a heavy session and high reps on the next, say 48 hours apart? Yeah, it's totally possible. In fact, that's pretty much what I said. Maybe you caught one of the videos where I only briefly mentioned it instead of the ones where I went into very, very long detail. But that is the general idea. It's not that you can't do both high reps and low reps and make amazing progress while doing both in the same routine. It's that you don't want to mix them for the same body parts or exercises in the same workout because it interferes with adaptation and it interferes with recovery pattern. Meaning, if you want to mix them in the same week instead of doing block periodization to where you break entire weeks up into individual rep ranges, if you want to do them during the same week, that's where you do concurrent style training or undulating periodization, in which you do them on different days. And so if you're talking about coming in and doing 3 to 5 reps one day, say Monday, for given exercises and body parts, and then coming in Wednesday, and you want to come in and work in the 10 to 12 rep range on that same stuff, yeah, that's perfectly acceptable. Just break them up by at least 48 hours and you should be fine if you want to undulate rep ranges. No problem at all. In fact, if you're going to do it, that is generally going to be the way to do it, to where you're going to make the most progress over time. I'm not talking about people saying, well, I did it and I made progress over the course of a month or whatever, but it's like, yeah, try that for 6 months straight. And they might still make progress even doing it for 6 months straight. That's what people need to realize. Just because you made progress doing something doesn't mean that the opposite approach wasn't better. That's why we measure this stuff in labs. That's why we have studies, because otherwise everyone's evidence for the fact that something works is the fact that they made it through a door. Well, some methods open a door faster than others. Some methods make that door swing faster. Some methods make you walk through the door faster. Some methods get your hand to the door handle faster. The fact that you made it through a doorway, in the course of 30 seconds doesn't prove that you opened the door and got through it as quick as possible, because another method got someone through a door in 3 seconds to the same door. That's a great analogy to look at these things. So yeah, separating them is definitely the way to go. All right, next question. How big is the risk of getting pattern overload when doing the same exercises over and over? How to recognize it, how to treat it, how to avoid it? All right, brother, when you're thinking of pattern overload, there is no such thing as pattern overload in terms of neurological effects, because that would be a good thing, meaning you've practiced doing a motion over and over and over until you've mastered it. That's a great thing. I think what you're referring to here is basically muscle imbalances and grinding down of joints from repetitive overuse. And that's something you would notice only with really high volumes of training, because it's normally something you see in factory workers or people who have some sort of manual labor job, to where they repetitively do the exact same thing every day in a mechanical fashion. You don't see that often with lifting. The only time you might see that with lifting is someone were doing something crazy like German volume training several times a week with the same exercises, something like 10 sets a set, 10 for months on end. That's what you would be worried about. I wouldn't worry about it with weightlifting. You might see it in something like throwing a baseball or swinging a tennis racket, because again, it's a swift motion that you could do perceivably hundreds, if not thousands of times in the same training session. That's a little different. You're just unlikely to see that exact problem itself in weightlifting, so I wouldn't really worry about it. All right, next question. When benching, if your legs are too short to reach the floor and they can't expand far enough to reach any type of stools on the sides of the bench, is it safe to place your feet on the pad instead? No, it is absolutely not ever safe to put your feet on the pad when bench pressing. Don't do it. I don't care what pro bodybuilders you've seen doing it. It completely removes your stability on the bench press. It's going to make you weaker on the bench press, and it's going to make it more prone to injury. You lose your stability. In fact, you'll notice something. You'll notice that when you see any powerlifting meet with benchers who've lost a leg, like Paralympic type bench pressing, or even when I was in the WPC, they had for wheelchair and paralyzed people or people missing a leg, they had benching for them. They strapped them to the bench. The reason for that is to reduce injury, because they have no way to stabilize themselves. It's stupid to put your feet on the bench. Anyone who does that is a complete moron who doesn't understand the basics of exercises or safety. There's no benefit for them to do that, only risk. Now, that being said, you need to find a way to stabilize yourself. Maybe you're talking about a child, maybe you're talking about a dwarf. You need to stack plates up, metal plates on the sides until their feet can reach them, so that they can dig their heels in for maximum stability, maximum power, everything else. But no, your heels need to be dug in, or the balls of your feet need to be dug into something hard that is stable into the sides to bench press correctly, to bench press safely, and to generate maximum power. That is just an absolute requirement. It's not optional. The only exception would be someone who's paralyzed or has a missing leg, a broken leg, something like that, in which case you might want to consider strapping them to the bench. Would be the better option, and just let their legs dangle to the side or dangle in front of them. They make specific benches for that for people who have those type of injuries and problems. They exist out there. We had them at powerlifting meets. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time in part 3.